You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call. I'm joined by Brad Hunt. Today's podcast guests are multiple people. Brice Bishop, owner of Peaks Peaks Equipment. We got Ryan Lampers, a.k.a. Stealthy Hunter. And we got Dave Brinker from the Altitude Podcast, and Dave's a musician. The group of us got together and we tested some gear. Brice had some Peaks equipment he wanted us to mess around with. We got up on the mountain. We did a little testing there, played around with it. It was very cool. We sat up by a campfire later that night and just hung out and talked. And around that campfire, we went around the horn and we basically said, well, what were some of the highlights from last year's hunts, and what did you learn? And kind of did just a season little recap, got together. What were some standout moments? And it's a cool little podcast. I think just guys hanging around a campfire. Story as old as time. It's just what folks have done for generations. So I think you'll like this one. It's different for each person's response is a little bit different, but there's a little bit of lessons learned, I think, as well. Because anytime you reflect on seasons past, there's always something, you could have done different, might have turned out different. And then there's things to celebrate. And that's what this show is all about. So thank you for tuning in to this podcast. If you want to win a $4,000 hunt package, right now you have about 2 weeks to get in on that. You just go shop at initialascent.com. Initial Ascent backpacks, every $10 you spend over there gets you entered to win.
Yes.
They carry more than backpacks. So if you already have a backpack or you don't need a backpack, you can get kit sacks, you can get air pads,
apparel,
you can get apparel, water bladders, skull hangers. There's lots of stuff over there. Like I said, if you need gear and you want to get in on a giveaway, there it is. $4,000 hunt package. Just shop at Initial Ascent. Thanks for tuning in and stay gritty. All right, folks. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call. I'm on No Name Mountain, the mountain that shall not be named, with some friends, Ryan Lampers, a.k.a. Stealthy Hunter. We got David Brinker from Altitude Podcast and musician Dave Brinker. And we've got Brice Bishop here. Brice is the owner of Peaks. And we're all here in the state of Montana. Because who lives here? Only Ryan and Brice, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Brinker and I had we deserve more praise because we had to come so far to get here, to give you guys our valuable time and attention. And we're here because we're up here on the mountain. We're testing some Peaks equipment, and we came here to get together and hang out and talk a little bit about work. And but we're just sitting here around a campfire. We got the podcast gear. We hiked it in a couple miles. And here we are. We're going to sit here and we're going to have a little conversation about, I guess what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about this past year, this season. I'd like to go around the circle here and for you to talk about the highlight of the season for you. Like, what?
I'm really not trying to sit this close to Ryan, but it's just getting hot.
Ryan decided to throw more fuel on the fire. Yeah, let's go.
Not very comfortable up here, folks.
Let's go. I got to take this jacket off. It's getting hot.
You don't have a glassing.
I feel like I'm getting interrogated and start sweating.
Yeah. So Ryan, let's start with you.
Yeah.
What was your highlight of the year? The last, let's say, the last 12 months or so.
Are we talking hunting? Or are we talking, what are we talking?
Yeah.
Hunting wise?
No, emotions.
Emotions.
We're not talking about feelings.
We just had a great conversation about feelings.
Oh gosh, this last season was great overall. I don't know if I can narrow it down to one.
My God. I have so many moments.
Well, I had a couple hunts with my daughters, and then we did have a pretty spectacular Alaska trip in there. So, that was hard to beat. But this last season, I got to hunt with Tana that hunt.
That was cool.
Was pretty neat. That was the first one that she's ever gotten to go on with me. And, obviously she was 7 years old. She's pretty tiny. And
she rode a llama.
She rode a llama. And ever since that, llamas are her thing. She can't get enough llama shirts, llama sweatshirts, llama stuffed animals. She's in love with llamas. And we had a great time. Kayam came with us on that trip. And in fact, we've shown that film on the Locals channel already. It's already been out. And it was just that was a trip that's going to be hard to beat, and one that she remembers, and she wants to go do it again. And then we had our big trip to Alaska. That was one of those once in a lifetime felt like trips where we got some great animals. Spent a ton of days up there. And then I think what capped it for me was a Montana hunt with my other daughter, Paley. And that's where we were on this quest to get this buck that we've been after for years,
This is year 3 or 4?
Yeah. We saw that buck the first day. And we got it on film that very first day that we were out there just looking for her first deer, and we videoed this buck, and we made a stock on that buck.
What's interesting is
it was a good buck.
If people saw the first hunt she was ever on where she shot her first buck, the buck you're talking about was in that film, and her victory was snatched at the last minute. She almost killed that deer, but it got away. And she got the other old crusty, which is cool.
The other good one, which was great, but she remembered,
She wanted that one.
And that buck had a kind of a unique set of antlers on it. It was already an older buck. Just kind of had a really unique set of, 3-point buck. It wasn't ever going to get to be a 4. And that following year, that was the goal. We went in. We actually found that buck. I found it before season. We saw it during the hunt. Somehow it eluded us, though. We weren't able to get a shot. Fast forward to this last season, and we went back in there.
Year 3.
Yeah, year 3.
Season 3.
And went back in. I had seen this buck probably a week and a half before Paley got there. Mm-hmm. And we chased that buck and finally got in on it, and we took it. And she made another great shot like she always does. And, she's been pretty pumped about the last 2 bucks that she got, but nothing compared to this one, because this was one that she'd been looking for 3 years there. And just an old, crusty, heavy horn buck that he just lived out in the
year after open. Year. You always wonder, did he make it through another winter? Did he make it another year? Is he still there? Did something get him? know? And for this buck, he was pretty old the first time we saw him. He was a nice framed big buck. You could see him on the video all silhouetted. It's a beautiful shot. And then the buck trots away just as she's about to pull the trigger on it. Buck gets away. You go the next year, gets away again. Third year you go. How old do you think this buck was?
I don't know. I mean, that buck, we figured that buck had to be 7, at least somewhere in that range.
That's old. And, out there?
Out there, yeah, especially. And,
public land.
We were experiencing some drought. So, the antlers didn't change much. You got a little heavier, got a little waviness to the horn like they often do with age. And, we found one of the sheds. In fact, Brad found it the year prior.
What are the odds
as we were
that?
looking for it? We just found one side, and it's like
she was carrying it around on her
exactly
backpack.
the same. Yep, she was carrying it around.
The latest film that dropped was the second buck she shot, and so
that was for folks that see this last film, you see that antler she's packing around. Well, that was from the buck that she really wanted, and lo and behold, we were able to finally put a tag on this.
What
buck.
A cool story, though. And the antlers. There wasn't a dramatic change year to year.
No, not really.
Just what he is.
I think a lot of it had to do with the drought. We weren't getting the best growth, and that buck wasn't. His genetics weren't. He was what he was. Like, he was a perfect 3-point. He kind of had a real unique front on him, and he was what he was. But yeah, just a great buck for her to get. She worked her tail off, and every year, as we go out for the season again, she talks about, well, that's the one we're going for.
Which buck of the 3 that she's taken? 2 questions. Which one do you think was the oldest? 3 questions. Which one was the oldest? Which one had the largest bases? Mm-hmm. And which one would score the highest?
This last one.
All 3?
Year. Yeah.
All 3. It ticks all 3 boxes.
I don't know about oldest. That first buck she took, that was an old regress. That thing had a sway back, pot belly. He was old. If I was any good, I'd get some of these teeth sent in and aged for real. But that was an old buck. That buck had clearly regressed from the year before, which we had seen him the year before. At least I had.
One too. Yeah.
Yep. And but then this buck that she got this year was a really old buck, so I don't know exactly. But this one had a much heavier, bigger frame to it than the prior 2. So yeah, it was like a mission accomplished after 3 years of chasing that.
My second question, another line of questioning goes like this: did your daughter shoot a larger buck than you both last year and this year?
Oh man. So and this film will come out too. We did get this film
of the big 3.
Yeah.
The end of the 3-year saga.
Yeah. Kayam was on that trip with us, and he got it all filmed up, and Kayam actually took a buck on that trip as well. Took his first mule deer. So it was a good trip overall. We all 3 filled tags, and my buck was, which I ended up taking after Paley got hers. He was a good buck. Again, I think it was a drought year, so he would have been a lot better on a normal. It's just a different rack. Not nearly as heavy as Paley's, but taller, wider, just a different rack.
Yeah.
But if I had to pick, I would have taken Paley's every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah. That thing was he's just a stud. So.
Yeah.
And another great shot. Like she's taken 3 deer now, and all 3, this buck was actually bedded. If you think back to that first deer that we shot for her, because she'd never taken one before, and for folks that have seen that video, you'll notice that I made her sit there until the buck stood up. Like we could have probably taken that buck at 200 yards while it was bedded, but I wanted her to have like max opportunity at that shot. It was her first deer. I wanted to make sure it was a good one. And this time though, this buck was bedded, and I have all the confidence in the world in her after seeing her shoot, a couple bucks already, and that thing didn't move.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the shot that people just saw if they were following the Gritty Films. She took a front-facing shot.
Yep.
And pancaked to that thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it just boom, done.
Yeah. Yeah. She put that thing right where it counted. And, it's funny, like the first year you're so worried, when you're taking a new hunter out, like, I want this to be a good experience. The worst thing that you could imagine would be like a bad shot on a deer or a wounded deer. That I feel like that could wreck them for life. That didn't happen, but so there's all like working up to that hunt. I just remember showing her picture after picture after picture of bucks. Like, where would you shoot while the buck's standing this way? How would you shoot this one? If he's front facing you, quartering to you, quartering away. And so she got really good at like putting the X where she should be taking that shot. And on that one, the one that we just showed in the film, he was a very hard quarter, almost facing directly at us. But he was quartered enough to where when you're looking at that buck, I remember telling her like right in the middle. And
exactly.
She knew what that meant. And she put that bullet right where it was supposed to be. And it just, like you said, it pancaked that thing.
It's so weird. The way the bullet hit, if you watch it in slow motion, the back legs are the first to collapse, and they come inward like it accordioned the deer, and legs pop up toward its belly, and it just flumps.
Yep.
It's the weirdest.
Capuche.
Yeah, totally. That's what she said. And capuche. It must have had so much force that it just forced it to fold. You know.
Yeah.
Yep. And must have knocked out the central nervous system or some kind of shock, because man, the thing just hit. What rifle was it?
That was the same gun that I've been shooting. That 6.5 RPM from Weatherby. That same gun. That was a 130 Scirocco, and she shoots that gun so well. It's funny, like her first gun, I got her a little 6.5 Creedmoor for her very first one. Even put a brake on that thing. There's like no kick to it at all, and she shot that for a year, and a very sweet shooting gun. But after that, we'd go out target practice, and she just wanted to shoot whatever I was shooting, and so we just went with that. So then, I'll pack the gun, and she doesn't have to carry it, and she just shoots what I shoot. Yeah, and that's the gun I've been shooting for the last few years.
Yep. Before we move on, the moose. Let's back up a little bit to the moose thing. You obviously got, obviously to me, I guess, maybe everyone else hasn't seen it, but the moose addiction is strong now. Like you've been bit by the moose bug. What is it about that hunt that kindled that fire? What is it that has got you so fascinated by it?
So I used to go to Alaska a lot. Folks that have followed, they kind of probably know that. I spent a lot of years up there way back in the day. And then there was a big gap. Like there was 20 plus years of gap, not going back. And so when you and I got the opportunity to go back up there, kind of like I remembered how much I liked it and how wild it is, just how many animals are up there, all the opportunities. And then how do you not like moose meat? Because
I know
moose meat is hard to beat, man. That was an old bull, and we walked away with a crud ton of meat off that thing. And it's just, Alaska's just a unique experience. It's hard to describe, but being up there here in ptarmigan all day long, opportunities to catch great fish and take down an animal of that caliber is pretty unreal. So yeah, I got the moose bug pretty bad right now, to the point that I'm giving up on elk pretty hard.
I know.
And just wanting to figure out all things moose for the next couple years.
The thing I think back both with the moose that Chris shot and then the moose that you shot. I've been on moose hunts. I've taken moose, but those two moose are two of the biggest moose I've ever. Even bigger, I think, than the one I was with Dustin Rowe and Green Tree and stuff. I think it's just, they were both big. And the brow tines on yours they're just sweet. It's hard to beat. And seeing those things, 3 cows come running in and seeing that bull come up behind and the sheer muscle and the neck and the wildness of the place, grizzly bears stomping around and wolves. And there's just something about it. The fishing, the pike.
We got to call a monster into like very, very close. And that was pretty neat how that all worked out. We had a great stock. We glassed him from a ways off, and I think we made the perfect stock on that bull and got in tight. And then you threw out some crazy noises, and for some reason that moose came running in.
Yeah, it was like a wolf howl hybrid cow and estrus.
Yeah, we didn't know if it was going to go the other way or come our way, and he came our way.
He came our way.
So
I feel like we figure it out as we go, and there's a little bit of luck, and then just a little bit of persistence.
Well,
or a lot of persistence.
And I think the moose thing for me too, like I've been chasing mule deer and elk for a lot of years down here. Moose is new. Like there's a lot to learn on moose hunts.
Yeah, it's like
it's a whole new challenge. And
where do they live? How do they eat?
49 now, and moose are big. They're hard to move around the mountain, moving meat.
You mean by 49? You mean 49 years old?
I'm 49 years old. I figure I've got a half a dozen good years of packing moose at least, and I want to take advantage of those years. So, I wish I would have taken it up quite a few years ago.
Yeah. So, David, let's hear some war stories from this year.
I'm glad David has to go after lampers because it's a hard act to follow.
Hard act to follow.
Jeez. I mean,
and he's better looking than me. Look at him.
I don't know. What was your highlight?
So similar to Ryan, my son was of age to hunt this year.
Yeah.
And so I got to take him on 2 different hunts, actually 3. The first was just blacktail in Western Oregon. And it was my son immerses himself in whatever he does. And I've been taking him hunting since he was a baby. And he's always had an interest in it. He's a great shot with a bow and with a gun. I think he's a better shot with a gun, frankly, than I am. He's so good. He's so calm. And he's just been educating himself his whole life, watching me. And it was just so fulfilling. I know people say it and it kind of becomes cliche. Like, it's so much more exciting to watch your kid succeed than it is yourself.
Yeah.
But it really is true. And it was a perfect first buck for him. It was like just a forked horn. I tried to find him something bigger, but in that logging country where I live, they're just few and far between, with the limited time I had to take him out. But we finally found a buck in a good spot, and he made a great shot on that. And it was really cool because he shot that buck, and in the picture, within a quarter mile there is where I killed that bull last year. And the reason that's cool is because that's where my dad started bow hunting.
Really?
In the 80s. Literally.
Wow.
That landing.
Wow.
So in the picture with my dad and my son with that buck, there's all that history. No one else knows this but me, but it's just so special. That was such a cool experience. Highly recommend it for anybody who has kids. Like, I think,
Talk for a minute about that bull too, because that wasn't this year, but
it was 2022.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah, so I've lived in Western Oregon, other than when I lived in Montana. I guess there was a 10-year stint. I didn't live there, but for most of my life, I've lived there. Hunted Roosevelts my entire life. And one of the things you quickly learn about Roosevelts is, unless you're Ryan Lampers, there's actually a lot of old ones, but they just don't get very big in our country. Like,
right.
It's pretty rare. Like, in my entire life, I've probably seen a half a dozen that would even go over 300.
When I interviewed Shannon Mobbs a couple of years ago, he had his whole house is filled with, and he does Angry Spike Productions. Yeah. I'd argue he's one of the best Roosevelt hunters there is. Yeah. His whole house is filled with beautiful Roosevelts. Not one of them break 300.
Yeah. I think the first time he broke 300 was last year.
Yeah.
So it just doesn't happen. And like I said, it may be less than a half a dozen. But anyways, long story short, my dad started bow hunting this one area that I had never actually bow hunted in the 80s. And last year, and this might sound like total bull, but I told my dad, or he called me one day. He said, I had a dream that you killed a giant bull in this area. He named the spot. And then he had this recurring dream like 2 or 3 times. And I'm not even bullshitting you. It was within a couple hundred yards of where it actually ended up happening. So what happened was I knew the genetics were there. There's not very many elk there anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll give it a try. I was kind of tired of our normal areas. I had a goal last year of killing a big Roosevelt. Normally I would shoot the first bull that walks by me and then go somewhere else out of state and hunt.
Yeah.
But last year I'm like, I didn't have any out of state tags. So I'm like, I will eat my tag or I'm going to shoot a big one. So when he had that dream, I'm like, well, I'll research it. That sounds fun. So started doing a bunch of research, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, I scouted the area a lot, could not find any elk. And finally, I found this is about 2 weeks before the season, where about a half dozen cows live. And a couple old rubs. And then some town rumors. Oh, there's a giant living up there, and but you'll hear those all the time. And I'm like, well, maybe there is. The genetics there. In the 80s, when my dad and his buddies were hunting here, his buddy killed the world record at that time, right there.
Okay, yeah.
And so, anyways, just the first couple weeks of the season, I just focused on those 6 or 8 cows, and And the first time I actually laid my eyes on him, there was a giant bull with him. And I'm like, well, that's nice. Couldn't tell how big or whatever. It was right at dark. And then, so I'm like, I am not leaving this spot for a month. It was, within a couple hours of my house to where I could actually like just go when it's good, when the wind's good. And, I just kept going when it's good for the first, I think I went up there 3 times, initially, and I was within 200 yards of him every time, but it was really brushy and he was really smart. And I was just playing it safe. One time I was 60 yards from him for like an hour while he's raking his horns. Dang. I didn't make a play on him because the wind was squirrely and I knew he wasn't leaving. There was nobody else hunting him. So I left him.
Patience. Regular old stealthy over here.
Well, I'm trying to learn from, normally, honestly, 5-10 years ago, I would have just barged in there, tried to call him in, and it would have never happened.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I tried bugling at him in the perfect scenario once, didn't work. And then I tried some cow stuff with him once, it didn't work. So I literally left the calls in my truck, or at least in my backpack. And,
good man.
And he was a very aggressive bull. He bugled all day. So I'm like, why do I need to talk to him? Mm-hmm. And he just sounded like a dinosaur, dude. He's just tearing trees out of the ground. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what was up with that dude. He had a bad temper, but he was probably the top 2 most aggressive Roosevelts I've ever encountered in my entire life. They just don't always act like right. You don't get in those bugle fests out there as much as you do here.
Yeah.
At least I haven't. Anyways, so I'm just going to hang out around this bull, and when the time's right, he's going to walk by me. And that morning I actually couldn't find him. And it was like, it might've been like 9:00. And I'm like, God, I thought everything was perfect. I thought I had this dialed. No, I lost him. And now I was just doubting. Mm-hmm. And then I was sitting on this landing in this 5-year-old reprod, just beating myself up. The wind was swirling, hitting the back of my neck. I'm like, I'm going to go home. And then I'm like, what the hell's that? That's a squirrel. That's a bull raking his horns. That's a bull raking his horns 30 yards from me. No way. And I'm like, but the wind was at my back. So I literally sprinted about a quarter mile back on this logging road, did a big loop on him. Anyways, I get down there and there was actually a squirrel in that spot. And I'm like, you dumbass. There was dropping a pine cone. And I'm like, and I was just sitting there kicking the dust, like, you're such a dip. You've been doing this your whole life and you got tricked again. And I look up and there's a cow looking at me. And I'm like, oh, it was. She runs off, but she runs up the hill. Jeez. She runs up the hill. And she didn't really know what I was because I was she just didn't, but she was nervous. So she goes up and then the bull just rips to my left. And I knew I was fine because
he didn't like her leaving.
Yeah.
He screamed.
So I pretty much, to make a long story kind of short, I hung out there. This also sounds like bullshit, but for people who haven't hunted Roosevelts, you know this. This is true. I had that bull within 40 yards for over an hour, and I could not see one piece of his flesh.
Yeah.
I could see trees. He's raking, he's bugling. It was so frustrating. I had one shooting lane at 10 yards. I had some cows come through it and stuff, and I was just hanging there, and I pretty much just going to hang there because it was 10 o'clock or about 10 o'clock in the morning, and he's still ripping. And a calf balls behind me because it turns out that cow that ran off had a calf. And he just goes, ugh, like he was pissed. And I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just try calling one more time with a calf call, just to see what happens. Because he wasn't coming any closer. And I just did a couple calf balls, and he rounded whatever cows he had and left 200 yards away. Yeah. So I'm like, you dip. And I was sitting there, and I remember the sun started hitting me, and I was pissed off.
You must suck as a caller.
Yeah, I really do. I've only been doing it for 35 years. You'd think I would know what the hell I was doing. But
that's the gamble, though.
Yeah, it was a gamble.
Would you agree, guys? Oh, yeah. It could work, but they could just round up.
My fear was I was kind of in a dip, and the wind was squirrely.
Yeah.
And I thought, I
mean, 10 o'clock in the morning, you're always in a risk of getting blown.
And the sun was starting to really blare, and he was in the shade. And I'm like, this is going to blow up.
Yeah.
But he ran off, Well, he didn't run. He just took his cows and he went over the hill. Mm-hmm. And what happened was the calf really started bawling now. And you could tell that cow and that calf were going to try to come back to the herd. And I was on a logging road and in between them. And then about 200 yards up, I heard him just, he was so pissed about that calf up there. So I'm just like, F it. I threw my backpack on. I put my calls away again. And I just ran as fast as I could trying to get between them. And I got up there. Oh, the other dream that I had before this all happened was I knew I was going to have to pass up a bull to kill this bull. Even though I hadn't seen another bull in there, I just knew that God was going to throw that by me. Because normally I would not
check
pass
your maturity.
Yes.
Are you ready for this?
I go running up there, and I get around this little corner, and here's a 5-point at like 35 yards. Has no idea I'm there. And normally I'd smoke that thing. But anyways, I let him walk off, and that calf and that cow come running off the hill. Wah, wah, wah. And it just pisses him off so bad. And the next thing, I jump up on a stump. I could hear him coming. I get up on a stump, and a couple cows pop out at like 15 yards, and I can hear him glunking and pushing them. And I see his tines coming through the Christmas trees.
Wow.
And he pops out. He actually stands on top.
So how much distance did he cover to meet up with this cow?
He probably came 50, 75 yards. But in that country, that's a bit of a move.
Yeah.
You know? And he came out in the open. This was only the third time I'd seen him in the open in the 10 days I hunted him, whatever it was. And anyways,
dude,
I see his tines come out, and I those cows were at 15 yards, and I was worried they were going to bust me because I was pretty obvious. Mm-hmm. I was taking a lot of risks, but they like kind of disappeared into the brush. And his tines, he actually walked up on a brush pile.
Oh, did he?
In the wide open, standing in the sunshine.
Standing on a brush pile.
Standing like on a, like a slash pile.
Yeah.
Anyways, by then I was drawn. I didn't have time to range because it all happened so fast. But I actually stopped him because there was some brush. I stopped him perfect. He looked at me. I guessed it at 40. I let that arrow go, and I thought I knew I pulled through it great, felt good, thought I heard it, and then it ran off, and I swear I could hear him thrashing and fell over. But you know how you doubt yourself. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I went down there, couldn't find the arrow, couldn't find blood. It was just, I had no cell service. I was by myself. I was depressed. So anyways, whenever that's happened to me in the past, I always go back to my backpack, get a granola bar, drink some water, and just sit for a half hour. I waited for a half hour before I went down there.
Yeah.
But then I went up and sat for another 20 minutes or 25 minutes. I'm like, I got up there. I finally ranged it. I'm like, it was 33, and I shot for 40. So I started thinking, I backstrapped it, or I shot over, or something stupid. So I'm like, no, I think I remember where my pin was, and I pretty much aimed at the top of his heart. I think it probably got in the rib cage. Anyways, finally got my senses together, and I went down there, and I finally found a little tiny pinprick of blood. And then another one, and it was aiming right at where I heard all the thrashing. He went like 75 yards in there. But anyways, bull of a lifetime. I've never in my life in 42 years seen a Roosevelt even probably the closest one I saw. I know how big it was because a guy killed it. It was 319, and I missed it 4 years ago. And then a guy killed it. That is a big bull. I have never seen a bull like this, and I may never ever again.
What is it? Your score?
332.
No way.
It's a giant. I mean, for a Roosevelt, you look at that and you're like, it's a dream come true.
It's a dream come true. It's my dream. And it was so special that it was right there where my dad used to hunt. My dad had those dreams. And then to go back there a couple months later, my son gets a buck.
I think that's a bigger Roosevelt than Ryan has ever taken.
I doubt it. Dude,
he just laughs.
Ryan has Roosevelts in his.
It's a big Rosie.
Yeah. It's a really big. They just don't get. I don't know what the equivalent. I think the equivalent would be like a. What do you think, Ryan? What's the equivalent in a Rocky? Like a 390 or something?
Probably.
Yeah, it's giant.
He's a monster.
They just don't. Most of the bulls I hunt are big 5 points and like little crab claws 6 points. That's just what they are.
That's phenomenal.
Anyways, that was those few things. Then I took my son to Hawaii and he shot an axis deer, which is just icing on the cake, which was really fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
That is cool. Yeah. What did Joel say about elk when we were at the Western Hunting Summit? He said, all big bulls are pedophiles.
Yep.
So
That's why
you did the right thing, Dave. You got between him
That
and the
was true.
child,
Yeah,
and
that's
you
so
killed the
funny.
bull.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, they just seem to be suckers for
Those calf
the young
balls. I've
ones.
seen that
Calf
happen
balls.
several times.
because
It's hard to imitate, but
he's cautious. He stayed in the thick. You couldn't get an arrow in him and stuff. You were right there, 10 yards, 40 yards. Still can't kill him. That's typical for a wise, old, cagey giant like that. All it took, though, was that young one up there getting a little scattered, a little messed up, and he just had to figure that out, and he exposed himself.
yeah, it's nice when you split them sometimes like that, and you know that you didn't blow the situation up and it kind of helped you.
I think a lot of times if you just regroup,
Mm-hmm.
you can salvage those
Don't
situations.
freak it out,
If you don't blow it, if you just be a little patient, those are actually good things that can happen.
Mm-hmm.
I split up a herd years ago. I was hunting with somebody, and we just came down kind of in the middle, and a group went here, and the bull went here, and there's about 5 or 6 cows here, and 5 or 6 over there. And he was like, "Get over here, ladies, get over here," and they just wouldn't come. They wouldn't come. They were looking at us and kind of freaked out. And I just bugled like big old chuckle, like nasty bugle, and he bugled, and I cut him off, and he bugled, went back and forth, and he just came ripping and roaring straight at us, it's like I took his cows, and I was in so tight, and all those other cows spooked because they looked at us and saw us, but he didn't know what was going on. All he knew was that these cows were divided.
Mm-hmm.
He came right in and got shot at 12 yards.
Joel told me that he doesn't even think he's going to bugle that much anymore. He just focuses.
Yeah,
on the
that's what he said at the
Yeah.
summit too.
I believe it, man. I've seen that. I'm not. It's tough to imitate exactly what those calves do, but if you can hit those notes and get those, it really winds up. I think it's like it must be like a crying baby to them or something,
Yeah.
Or they are pedophiles.
Yeah, they're definitely. It's not an or. They are. Brice, what do you got? What do you got for us?
I mean, I think Lampers will appreciate the beautiful whitetail that I shot last year.
Yeah, that was a nice
Lampers is a big whitetail guy.
highlight,
You know,
Brice.
It was the
What's the
highlight.
Not the downside of the season.
No, I don't think it's a coincidence that so far the highlight of all three of us has been time with our kids. We've had conversations, Brian, several times about my boys are really involved in sports, and so I don't get the opportunity to hunt with them very often throughout the season because every weekend they're just tied up with basketball games, traveling throughout the state and doing their thing. And so when I do get to hunt with them, it's really special to me. And my son Blake, he had one day during rifle season to be able to get out and hunt, and it just happened to be one of those bitter cold weekends that we had. And so it was negative 17 when we woke up, and by the time we got to the trailhead where we were going to start hiking in, I think it was negative 10, and we just were like, we're gonna go for it, right? Yeah, it was
those
cold.
are horrible temperatures.
And you could tell that he was kind of like, I don't know if I want to go do this. I'm not sure if I really want to go out in this weather. But we were with a buddy who was like, who asked us if we wanted to go out, and I said sure. And so we just got out of the truck and started going. We hiked up this ravine and then up this pretty steep face into this basin, and we were actually looking for elk, and we got up to the top of it and started glassing, and we just didn't turn up any elk. But across the basin on the opposing hillside, this one lone, and Lampers will appreciate this, one lone mule deer buck just standing there on this big face all by himself. And not a big buck by any means, just a small little buck. But I was like, Blake, this could be your only chance to shoot something. And it was wide open. I mean, there was not a real good route to try to get in position to take a shot at this buck. But we kind of planned our route. We figured out the best way to try to get as close as we could without being seen. And we just started slowly moving our way down and being very careful and trying to teach him, how to maneuver the terrain and stay out of view and just get in a good position. And we got underneath this buck where he was way up above us and navigated through the terrain a little bit more to this big rock pile that had one tree and had a real big boulder right in the middle of it. And so we got him up there and we were propping him up. He was like hanging half off this boulder, and this buck was still it was about 600 yards. And I was like, we knew the rifle that we had with us was fully capable of a shot that far. Mm-hmm. But we just didn't know in the cold weather like that if he was going to be able to hold it together. And, we got him in position. One of us was holding one of his foot up underneath him and the other one was trying to help him, get on the buck, and he was having a hard time getting on the buck through the scope, and finally got on the buck and took a first shot, missed. We thought this buck was just going to run right back into timber. It did start going that way, and for some reason this buck just held up right on the edge and then turned around and started coming right back out. And so we're like, do it again. So he jacked another one in the chamber and tried to get on him, shot, missed a second time. And he's like, I'm right on it, Dad. We checked, the turret on it, made sure that it was dialed correctly. And we said, you got one last chance. He's coming over to this ridge line. He's going to pop over it and he's going to be gone. Mm-hmm. And, he's freezing cold. It's 10 below outside, barehanded on this gun for that long, trying to make this shot.
And your fingers freeze so fast.
So he was just dying. You could tell he was just about to give up, right? It was just one of those moments where he was just going to go, I can't do this. But we said, you can do it. Just get on him again. Just take your time, squeeze the trigger just really nice and smooth. And he hit that third shot and he just drilled him. And you just saw this buck get hit and just do the jump and the kick and then just start trying to run up over this ridge line. And he did get up over the ridge to where we couldn't see him. But we hiked up. We had a hard time finding him, but finally we did find that buck. And it was for Blake, it was one of those moments of like, wow, this was a really hard thing for me to do.
Yeah.
But he did it, and you could just see how proud he was of himself in that moment, that he just stuck it out and he didn't give up, even though his fingers were just frozen. And he was shaking so bad by the time we got him off that boulder. He was so cold. But it was just a great experience. And just to watch that with your child and just see them be successful and take advantage of the opportunity, the only opportunity that he had all season. And by no means was it a trophy buck at all, right? It was a really small buck, but that didn't matter to him. It didn't matter to me. It was just a great experience with him on the mountain. And I think something that he'll remember for a long time. He always still brings up that I have the longest shot on a deer in our family. It's just, and that that wasn't really what was important, but it was to him, it was an accomplishment, right. And so for me, that was definitely the highlight of last season. Kym and I got to go out with Mark on an elk hunt that turned into, I would say,
a packing
quite
trip?
The goat show.
The llama show.
It was we took
quite the llama show.
Yeah, quite the llama train wreck.
That's crazy.
This is an area that Mark had.
Was there grizz?
We were in the heart of grizz country, but we never did see a grizz. Kym and I ran across one track one time, one morning, but we never did actually see any grizzlies. But this hunt had it just from the very get-go was a struggle bus. And, I've never experienced this in my life, but we were 8 or 9 miles in thinking that we were going to get away from everyone and everything and just have this whole place to ourselves. And Mark, you guys know how good he is at e-scouting.
Yeah.
And when he says there's going to be elk right here, there's elk right there. And he's very proud of that. I can't tell you how many times he's like, see, I've got a number 1 on my map right there that they were. But man, we had so many challenges that hunt, but the biggest one were all these free range horses that were up in this area that about every 5th one had a bell on it. And so the whole time you're hunting, literally it was just like ding, 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 horses everywhere. I mean, we could not get away from them, but it didn't really seem to bother the elk that much, to be honest. I mean, we got into elk every single day, but we just could not. They were very
timid,
call shy. And Mark he's a caller, right? And he's a good caller. And that's his technique. And I was with him in his area and that's what we did, but we just could not get these bulls to come in. I mean, they would come in, but they'd hang up at that 100-yard mark and they just would not come in.
It's still, every hunt you go on with Livesey is entertaining.
No, man,
it's never not entertaining.
I think that, I don't know. I mean,
he's a funny dude.
Yeah, you could ask.
Does he pack monsters in? I'm just curious.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
I'm sure he has, and
I've
never seen him without a monster.
His morning routine.
His wife said if he doesn't have a monster, he's not right.
I don't remember that. I shared a teepee with him, but it was.
Can you freeze dry a monster?
Yeah. It was just one of those hunts where it was just a great experience because we just had a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. We had so much bad weather on that hunt. We hunkered down under tarps and built fires. And
it's funny how some hunts that just really don't pan out, still leave you fulfilled.
Yeah, it definitely was a great experience. And new country that I've lived here, since 1988, and this is a place that I've never been to before.
Yeah.
And Mark's so good about just wanting to go explore new terrain and new country and figure it out. And I think sometimes that's to his detriment a little bit. He's got ADD when it comes to hunting areas. He'll go in for a few days, and if it's not working out, he'll bail out. But we were in there 8 days, I think.
Yeah.
And it never worked out. Few close opportunities, but we not knowing the area, we just screwed it up. So
we had a couple of hunts. I mean, our spring hunt was a little rough. The last year, mule deer was rough. We were on some hunts where we were out there extended days. And Ryan turned to me. I remember, this is actually, you said to me before, you said after like 16 days of grueling and no success, it's not supposed to be like this.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to be like this.
It's
like
not how it works.
If you put in that dedication, hike those miles, put that much time in, work that hard, you're almost always rewarded. But that's the key. It's almost always.
Well, and what made matters worse is, I'm with Mark and Kym, and we're having a great time in this area, but my brother and my nephews and my niece are in our normal.
Yeah, and they're just like slaying and
5 bulls in 6 days, right? Like,
just like,
I mean, you're just getting those texts on the inReach, and you're going, "Are you kidding me? Another one? Another one?"
Yeah.
So I was a little jealous that while I was struggling to make things work over there with Mark, that they were having such success in an area that we know very well, but. Again, I wouldn't have traded that experience for anything else. It was just cool. It was really good. So.
There's a couple of things that stand out for me. One was my brother shot his first bear, and I was a little worried about whether Brent could hack the hunt and the steeps and the terrain. And man, he took it all in well and climbed the hills and did the hunts, carried the loads. He wanted that success. He wanted a bear bad. He wanted it. He put in the work, and he got himself a bear, real pretty red bear. And so that was cool. It was cool to see. I mean, I would have, if you'd asked me a couple years ago if Brent would hike that terrain and climb those hills. He's lost 85 pounds.
Wow. He looks so good. I can't, we were at the Hunt Expo, and when he walked up, I bet you it had been, I don't know, a year since I had seen him. I was like, wow, he has really put in the work to get in shape and look better and get healthier. I
tell you, I was, it was really cool to see that, to see him take charge and achieve.
That's cool.
2 hunts stand out though, above and beyond all the rest for me that are just highlights, and that's the moose hunt for sure. There was something special about floating a river all day in the heart of Alaska. No, nothing but us out there, surrounded by the wilds, the grizzlies, the wolves, and just you never know. You never knew if around some corner there was going to be some prehistoric giant with a giant white paddles just turning your way, and you're just glass, just looking for that beast. And there's just something about that was really fun, really exciting. The caribou were neat. They were a lot cooler than I think either of us expected. Much more rewarding to pursue, really fun. And it turns out, at the end of that trip, when we got out of there, what we achieved from people who had been going in there 20 plus years, they're like, nobody has come out with loads like this many caribou, this caliber of moose and this many moose. Like it was special. I don't know that we can repeat that sort of thing again from what people say. Sometimes it just seems like all the stars align. Then you go on another hunt and it seems like nothing aligns. Yeah. Despite all your best efforts. That was one of those special ones where the only thing that didn't align was I didn't get a moose on that trip.
Well, and so aspirational too, man. I've told you several times that is my favorite series that you've put out.
Yeah. And for some people, I've heard similar things people said similar things about it.
It just made me want to figure it out, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I haven't done it yet, and I need to pin Lampers down and say, all right, tell me how to make this work. And I know there's issues with trying to logistically make it work
something
now,
like that. But it is
man, it's incredible.
That's the thing too, is sometimes things come together and you can make up all these reasons for why you're like, I'm not going to do this hunt, or I'm not going to make this, I'm not going to pay the money, I'm not going to make this trip, I have too much work to do, to name it all. And this trip was it just sort of came to us. It was in our lap, and it was a decision to make. And flippantly, I think we could have been like, we got these great tags here and here. We could have just not done it. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, it's not that repeatable. We can't just necessarily repeat that event ever again. It was a special moment. When those things come up, I say, jump on them. Yeah. Do them. Don't just find a way. You won't care later. Money only gets you so far, and it's really adventures and the people you meet and the places you see that really matter. The other hunt that stands out for me that I found deeply rewarding, because I love heat and I love the desert, was Mexico. I freaking love the feels of the desert, the sounds, the colors, the animals. I love these Coues deer in the mountains, how their racks are formed, the kickers and the mass, and it's just like
this is the one whitetail species that Lampers will pursue.
That's the one he respects.
Yeah, I'm okay with it.
I remember the first time you went down there and did it, though. You were still kind of on the fence about it.
I was, until I realized that they're a different kind of animal. They're not your ag rat that Brice likes chasing.
Hey, I just like good meat.
They're a tough critter, but there's something about that. And it wasn't just, it was just the calmness, the desert, how it's so silent. There's a lot of peace, I feel like. And this terrain was like, it felt like you were in wilderness.
It felt like a wilderness out in the desert.
Yeah.
So far.
Giant cats roaming around, mountain lions. You got javelina, bears. I mean, it was really a wild place. We had the Osceola. Was that what they are? Turkeys?
You don't have your turkey slam? Jeez.
Yeah, I know.
It wouldn't have been
It's
hard
amazing.
in that spot.
But and then you combine that with the locals, the culture. It was neat to sort of spend some time around those people, and it gives you an appreciation for the country you're from. Just to see their nutrition, which is pretty bad.
Beans and rice.
And soda pop. If that. And man, the food wrecked me for sure. I'm gonna have to bring a little more, be a little more prepared next time. But they're so grateful to get that little bit of meat that we provided when we shot those deer. I mean, they were like vultures, like descending on a carcass. You know, they were like on it so fast. But I just found that trip, just being up in the cliffs, looking down, seeing these bucks run around and chase and fight each other and stuff. It's just a really neat place, a really neat hunt. It way exceeded my expectations. So talk about two extremes between Alaska and the deserts of Mexico.
The desert takes a lot of heat. No pun intended.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's one of the most underrated environments.
And I would say where we went, it was so mountainous.
Yeah.
There was so many trees. It was so thick.
But if you go to the true desert, like where we hunted in Arizona for Coues deer and stuff like that, like you look at it and you're like, they're in the living damn thing out here.
Mm-hmm.
It is brutally tough environment. But when you sit back and listen and watch, the wildlife in the desert is just everywhere, you know? Yeah. And the deer, at least those first few years we were going down there, just the amount of deer you're seeing, you're like, these deer are tough, man. Living here in the summer cannot be fun.
Even the mule deer that we saw too, it was just a neat hunt. And then the multiple stalks you can go on, what you learn through trial and error. It's neat.
A lot of error.
There was no density. The density of deer where we were in Mexico was a fraction of what you see in Arizona. We thought we'd go to this wilderness, wild area, and there would just be so many animals because nobody's killing them. Not so. Not so at all. Arizona is packed with animals.
Yeah, I feel like that first time we went, if I remember correctly, there was mornings we were seeing 50 deer.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's a
not
lot.
In Mexico. You see 3, and you're like, if you see any, it's just pretty shocking. Yeah, but the ones you see, man, they can be special.
Yeah.
So,
is that a hunt you want to go do again in Mexico?
Yeah.
Oh, it's on the books again.
Yeah, we're
I want to do it every year. I don't ever want to miss it.
Really?
Yeah.
I want to do Arizona when I get that opportunity too.
We left a couple of special bucks down there. Like we've got bucks that we want to go back for.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, those two things stood out for me. I had a blast hunting with Mark. Filmed Eli shoot his first buck.
Was that Eli's first buck?
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
Yep. That was neat. I got to spend some time. And it was really neat to film Mark. I think he shot his best mule deer ever. That one we got on in the blizzard.
So wide. I remember when you guys sent the pictures of that thing. I'm like,
it's a stud.
That's a stud buck.
It's a stud. I mean, it was a neat buck, and Mark was truly excited. The buck I shot was nice. I was pretty happy about that, given the conditions, the year, the timing. A lot of people weren't getting into bucks at all, so that was fun. That was great. I enjoyed it, but yeah, the Alaska and the Mexico thing, ironically, really stand out, and those are do-it-yourself type adventures that your blue collar guys can do.
Yeah,
they're not so out of the price range that they can't be done, and I just feel like, man, I wish I had tried some of this stuff earlier. And we're gonna dive into the moose thing a little bit more, Ryan and I. A little bit of grizzly. We're scrapping. We're trying to find some more Alaskan adventures that we can squeeze in, some black bear, just to see Alaska more.
I think that's really cool.
That's the goal.
It's one of my biggest regrets from my hunting career is not spending more time in the North Country. And I'm going to try to change that over the next decade too.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at. Yeah. I feel like
I just hate missing September with elk.
Yeah.
Yeah, us too.
But gosh, the elk are going to be there when you get back.
That's what I was saying. Ryan and I were talking about that very thing, and I'm like, technically, if I miss 3 or 4 elk seasons to do a few of these Alaskan adventures, we were talking about a grizzly hunt in September, and it's like, man, I hate to miss elk. Truth is, I could hunt 2 elk a year for 20 years, from age 55 to 75.
You can do for a long time.
I can make that stuff work.
Yeah. Alaska changes as you get older.
Yep, exactly.
It gets a little bit tougher.
Yep.
Carrying those moose quarters.
There'll always be elk opportunities, especially for us here in Montana.
I think that's a really good point. I've actually spent a lot of time thinking about this because, like I said, I regret it. It's being able to be like, you know what? My over-the-counter, wherever you live, tag, Montana, Oregon, it's going to be there. It's going to be fine. And like you almost feel like you are it's like part of your persona. I hunt elk.
Betraying your own.
Yeah, it's like I'm betraying myself by not being an elk hunter this September. Like I'm going to, like it's like FOMO, big time.
Yeah.
But if you look back on your life, like, gosh, those Alaska adventures are. You're not going to get to do that forever.
It's not just Alaska either, like I said, like the Mexico, but also New Zealand is one of the highlights of Ryan and I's hunting careers. When we think back on that, that was life-changing for both of us, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's those hunts that take you out of your box and make you sacrifice something that you love to go do. Well, not so much New Zealand because that's usually off season.
Yeah.
But like Alaska for sure. Not so much Coos deer either because that's usually in January. But for sure, those northern adventures.
Yeah, they can get in the way of existing hunts, but like, I think it's one of those things you can't afford it. Like, I can't afford it all the time or every year or that kind of thing. So, to me, just prioritize it, make some of those things happen, have those adventures.
I think the other thing
and the other thing too is I don't want to belittle elk hunting or mule deer hunting or any of this stuff right in your backyard. There's so much reward from it, so much reward that you don't even want to do the moose hunt in lieu of missing out on your elk hunt. But there is, having done it, like Ryan, I don't think you expected to value that Alaskan hunt as much as you did. It exceeded your thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you live in a state like Montana, too, you get stuck in such a rut of.
You're spoiled.
A beautiful rut.
We're so spoiled. Yeah,
it is a beautiful rut.
Yeah, it's a good rut to be in.
We're so spoiled with all of our hunting opportunities, right? Like, I mean, you can hunt bear in the spring. You can hunt antelope in.
There's only 2
August.
months you can't hunt something, right?
Pretty much
June through August 15th.
I mean,
Yeah, you guys are an anomaly, actually.
But what I realized last year was that I need to get out of that rut. Watching that moose and caribou film and then watching the Coos deer series, I'm like, man, I got to just stop doing the same thing every year, and I got to go have an adventure somewhere.
The only time that I've successfully done those other hunts is just when you say, I'm doing it, I'm putting on the calendar 2 years from now or whatever, and you book it.
Yeah.
You can't think about it. If you remotely have the resources and you can make the time, if you overthink it, you'd be like, yeah, but I also might draw my tag in New Mexico or whatever. Yeah. You start doing that bullshit, you will never go. You just book it, whether that means you book an airline ticket, something that makes you committed to it.
Put it on the books.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where I've fallen short is like, I've been talking about doing a float moose hunt my entire life. And every year I talk to somebody about it. I have plenty of resources to do it in terms I know people.
Yep.
But I just never put it on the damn books because it's elk season.
Yeah.
So this spring I talked to one of my hunting buddies who I'd probably do the trip with, and I said, we just need to effing book it.
Yeah.
Like, just put it on there. So that way I'll start to mentally prepare to miss that elk season.
Yeah.
Like I can emotionally get detached from it.
Yeah,
and you're not going to miss the whole thing anyway.
Well, and you could work on getting a rifle elk season in instead.
Yeah.
Sure. Like you and I did that once where it was just OTC and we had a pretty good elk. We in retrospect, we could have, you learn a lot. You could do it again. I just feel like, there's a lot of adventures outside, and as it's gotten harder for a lot of us to get tags, and great tags, I think considering the cost benefit of going to like a New Zealand or an Alaskan DIY, this Mexico deer, like there's a lot of hunts out there that are not going to break the bank, that provide a lot more adventure than going in your own backyard. And could fill in the gap and satisfy some of those cravings that us adventure type people have, us adventure hunters have. Axis deer in Hawaii, that's another one. You've done it a bunch of times. There's something about some of those trips that can sort of fill in the gaps, I think, for the more blue collar guy.
Yeah.
That,
I had FOMO this week. I saw Foss was in Australia hunting water buffalo. I've kind of always wanted to do that.
I want to do scrub bull.
Or like Rusa deer down there. Like there's just so many cool things. And every time I do one, I'm like, I'm going to do this every year. And then they all add up and then you don't have time.
Yeah. I know. We said New Zealand, we're going to go back every year. We haven't been back since. Now, part of that's pandemic kind of stuff that got us. But we were planning on going every spring till we died. Like we were in it, you know. And now we've done the moose. Now we got to like work that in. It's just like,
I think out of all the things that I've done, that was the most magical place I've ever been, including
the Axis?
New Zealand.
Oh, New Zealand.
Yeah. New Zealand is undescribable until you put your feet in those mountains. Like you just can't put it into words.
And it's so affordable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very affordable.
And getting game rich. I mean, like that, we're not.
I know. And I was listening to some Kiwis like complaining about, the lack of game. And I'm like, dude, you guys are spoiled. There's like critters everywhere. Where you, no good bulls anywhere. You're like, dude, come hunt here where you don't see anything for 16 days.
Right.
Saw 3 deer. Like it can be a lot. It can be pretty special in New Zealand with no natural predators. Now they've been doing stuff to cull animals and stuff, but just do some research, go on an adventure. I hope everybody that was listening got a little excited. Maybe
I'm excited.
Trip
to go to bed.
Yeah, got him.
It is. Really late.
It's 11:40. This is like 3 hours past my bedtime.
I know.
We got to get up early and do some glassing.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so we're going to wrap this up, folks. We appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you got something out of that. And we'll see you on the next one. Stay gritty.